Okay, tell me this. How do you rob a $100 million jewelry store in broad daylight and walk out in under 3 minutes like it's nothing? Sounds impossible, right? Well, not for the Pink Panthers. These guys aren't your average criminals. They've been called the real-life Ocean's 11, pulling off heists so slick that even Interpol had to create a special task force just to chase them. And the wildest part? Nobody knows exactly how many of them exist, or even where they are today. Some say they're retired millionaires sipping champagne in Monaco. Others believe they're still out there, planning the next heist. This isn't fiction. This is the untold story of the Pink Panthers, the most successful and elusive jewel thieves the world has ever seen.
So, who exactly are the Pink Panthers? Interpol didn't just pull that name out of thin air. In one of their earliest heists, police found a stolen diamond tucked away inside a jar of face cream, almost identical to a scene from the classic Pink Panther movie. From that moment on, the name stuck, and it's been haunting Interpol files ever since. These guys weren't pulling off small-time robberies in back alleys. Nah, they went big. We're talking luxury boutiques in Paris, London, Dubai, Tokyo, anywhere dripping with diamonds and gold. And the scale? Investigators estimate they've stolen over $500 million in jewels across more than 35 countries. That's why law enforcement calls them the most successful jewel thieves in modern history. And here's the kicker. They're not some giant criminal organization with one big boss. They're a loose, mysterious network. Nobody knows exactly how many members there are or how deep the web goes, which, honestly, is what makes their story even crazier.
Here's the part that really blows people's minds. Where did the Pink Panthers actually come from? Most investigators believe their roots trace back to the Balkan Wars of the 1990s. When the fighting ended, thousands of young men who had spent years in military units suddenly found themselves without jobs, in countries torn apart by poverty and corruption. And what do you do when you've been trained in weapons, tactics, and survival, but there's no future waiting for you? For some, the answer was simple. Turn that training into profit. That's why experts say many Panthers were ex-soldiers from Serbia, Montenegro, Bosnia, men with discipline, fearlessness, and the kind of coordination you just don't learn on the streets. Think about it. Timing a robbery down to the second, controlling chaos in high-stress moments, vanishing across borders, it all screams military precision. But here's the twist. They weren't a mafia with a single boss pulling the strings. They operated as a shadowy network. Different crews, different jobs, connected loosely through trust, family ties, and whispers in the underworld. Interpol admits they don't even know how many members there really are. 10, 50, 100? The truth is, the Pink Panthers thrive in mystery. And that's exactly what makes them feel less like criminals and more like legends.
Now let's talk about the jobs that made the Pink Panthers into legends. Because these weren't just robberies, they were like mini blockbusters. In 2003, in London, 2 men walked into the Graff jewelry store in broad daylight. They were polite, calm, just browsing. Then, in seconds, they pulled out guns, smashed glass cases, and scooped up more than $30 million in diamonds. Police thought they'd find them easily, but when the dust settled, one stone was discovered hidden inside a jar of face cream, a stunt that mimics the one in the Pink Panther movie, and that's exactly how they got their name. 3 million pounds of which was recovered 2 years later. One of the thieves was sentenced to 15 years in prison in July 2004. 2 years later, they returned for another 1 million pound job, one thief even carrying a firearm. These weren't random attacks. Graff became almost like their playground. But London wasn't their only stage. Same year in Tokyo, in the glittering Ginza district where luxury stores lined the streets, the Pink Panthers struck here too, smashing their way into a boutique and grabbing about 3.5 million yen worth of gems. It was quick, brutal, and successful. But that was just the warm-up. 3 years later, in June 2007, in the same Ginza district, they came back bigger and bolder. This time, the Panthers didn't just rely on speed, they brought chaos. Two men, later identified as Rifat Hajatmekovic and Radovan Yelušić, stormed into a high-end jewelry store. Before anyone could react, they pulled out canisters and sprayed tear gas directly at the sales staff. Imagine that, a luxury shop filled with choking gas, employees blinded and coughing, while the thieves coolly scooped up a tiara, necklaces, and a fortune in gems worth nearly 284 million yen. That's more than $2 million. And just like that, they were gone. In the middle of one of the busiest districts in Tokyo, with the kind of boldness that turned their crimes into international headlines. Prior to the Tokyo heist, there's the Dubai heist, which occurred in April 2007, when they drove two stolen Audi A8s through the mall's entrance and into the house of Graf jewelry store, stealing jewelry and watches. In less than 2 minutes, they raided a jewelry store and sped off into the night. By the time security realized what had happened, the Panthers were already across the border. But if Dubai heist was shocking, Paris heist in 2008 was outrageous. 4 men disguised as women, with wigs, makeup, and dresses, strolled into a Harry Winston boutique. Shoppers didn't think twice. In under 3 minutes, they were gone, carrying nearly $80 million worth of jewels. To this day, it's one of the largest jewel heists in history. In 2013, the gang was suspected to have struck again when a man wearing a baseball cap and a scarf covering his face broke into the Carlton Hotel in Cannes and made off with $136 million worth of jewels and jewelry being stored by the Leviev Diamond House for an exhibit. Nice Matin, a leading newspaper in the region, speculated that this may have been one of the most costly jewelry thefts in history. Each job was different, but the message was the same: move fast, be fearless, and vanish before anyone can react. These weren't desperate smash and grabs, they were surgical strikes. And the scariest part? They made it look easy.
So how did the Pink Panthers manage to pull off jobs that looked effortless? The secret wasn't chaos, it was structure. Every crew was small, usually just 3 to 5 people. That's it. One was the driver, one was the lookout, one was the muscle, and sometimes a fourth played the part of a regular customer, casually checking out diamonds before giving the signal. The beauty of it? With crews this small, even if police caught one group, they could never shut down the whole network. But make no mistake, these heists weren't improvised. Panthers spent weeks, sometimes months, scouting targets. They studied security cameras, timed guard patrols, even rehearsed getaways like athletes running drills. When the day came, the whole operation usually lasted less than 2 minutes. In fact, criminology experts studying their methods said it often took less time than it takes you to order a coffee. Disguises were part of the playbook too. Wigs, fake uniforms, even cross-dressing. Anything to delay recognition. And the second they had the jewels, it wasn't just about running, it was about vanishing. They'd switch cars, cross borders, and exploit the fact that police in one country couldn't chase them into another fast enough. And maybe the most chilling detail? They rarely relied on violence. Their goal wasn't to terrorize, it was to get in, get out, and disappear before anyone even realized what had happened. Clean, fast, professional. That's what made them different.
By the mid-2000s, the Pink Panthers had pulled off so many jaw-dropping robberies that the world's police forces couldn't ignore them anymore. Interpol did something it almost never does. They created a special task force dedicated entirely to hunting the Panthers. Imagine that. One jewel thief crew became such a global headache that the world's police network built an entire unit just to chase them. And sure, arrests happened. In fact, over the years, more than 200 suspected Panthers have been captured across Europe, the Middle East, even Japan. But here's the kicker. It never really slowed them down. Why? Because there was no single boss pulling the strings, no central headquarters. Take down one crew, and another would strike weeks later in a different country. It was like chasing shadows. Interpol started linking robberies through DNA evidence.
In 2005, 3 Serbs, 2 men and a woman, were arrested in Belgrade after stealing the legendary Comtesse de Vendôme necklace worth £15 million from a Tokyo boutique. That was Japan's biggest jewelry robbery ever. By 2007, the gang leader was sentenced to 7 years, while the others got lighter terms. A victory, sure, but it didn't stop the Panthers' momentum. One name stood out: Dragan Mikic. He wasn't just any thief, he was on Interpol's most wanted list, suspected of being a senior Panther. But here's the wild part. In 2005, he literally broke out of prison using a ladder while accomplices sprayed the walls with machine gun fire to cover his escape. Straight out of a movie, right? And he wasn't the only one. In 2009, French police in Monte Carlo swooped in on 3 Panthers lurking near jewelry shops. Then, in 2012, Rome police nailed a head figure named Mitar Marjanovic after his fingerprints were found on loot from a bank robbery. But even those big wins didn't slow things down, because almost at the same time, in Athens, police stumbled across another Panther crew in the most unexpected way. 2 Serbian men wearing wigs while casing a jewelry store caught the attention of patrolling officers. When confronted, they bolted. One of them, a 36-year-old, even opened fire, injuring a police officer before being caught. Their arrests led to the capture of a third member, 43-year-old Olivera Vasic Cirkodic, a Serbian woman believed to be part of the gang. And here's where it gets wild. Just a few months later, in July 2012, Olivera escaped from prison in Athens. The setup sounds straight out of Ocean's 11. A man walked in pretending to deliver art supplies, knocked out a guard, stole the keys, and freed her. Just like that, she vanished back into the shadows. The escapes didn't stop there. In Switzerland, 2 members staged a Hollywood-level prison break in 2013. Their accomplices stormed the gates with guns blazing while the thieves scaled the walls and disappeared into thin air. Another Panther had already escaped years earlier with nothing more than a rope. And in 2015, 6 suspected members were arrested in Croatia with military-grade gear and cars disguised to look like police vehicles. Proof the gang was still scheming. Interpol itself admits it's like fighting smoke. The Panthers use false passports, safe houses spread across Europe, and the fractured politics of the Balkans to vanish without a trace. Even today, nobody knows how many are still active. Some say they've retired on millions. Others claim they're quietly planning the next big job. But here's the twist. In 2016, Interpol finally announced the end of Project Pink Panthers. Rachel Billington, their spokesperson, explained why. The mission had worked. The main goal wasn't to single-handedly catch every Panther, but to create a global network of officers who could share intelligence seamlessly. And by end of 2016, national police forces had matured enough that they didn't need centralized coordination anymore. They could exchange data and coordinate manhunts directly, country to country. And that's the terrifying beauty of the Pink Panthers. Catching one doesn't mean catching them all. It just means the game keeps going.
Here's the thing. Most criminal gangs fade into police records and get forgotten. The Pink Panthers? They became legends. Their robberies were so bold, so perfectly executed, that filmmakers and journalists couldn't resist. Documentaries like Smash and Grab, the story of the Pink Panthers, turned their lives into a global fascination. Headlines called them the real-life Ocean's 11. People compared them to Robin Hood or James Bond villains, suave, disciplined, almost glamorous. Part of it came from their style. They weren't usually violent, they didn't spray bullets or terrorize crowds. Instead, they were fast, calculated, and gone before anyone even realized what had happened. And in a strange way, that made people admire them, even though at the end of the day, they were still stealing millions in jewels and leaving chaos behind. But their influence didn't stop at pop culture. Luxury boutiques across the world changed their security systems because of the Panthers. Stores upgraded glass, reinforced doors, and police forces started cooperating internationally in ways they never had before.
all because one mysterious network of jewel thieves kept embarrassing them on the world stage. And here's what really cements their legacy. Their story isn't over. Some Panthers are in prison, sure, but others? They're still out there. And the idea that one day we could wake up to news of another Pink Panther heist? That's the kind of myth that refuses to die.
So, what do we make of the Pink Panthers? On one hand, they were ex-soldiers turned jewel thieves, men who swapped the battlefield for boutiques and used military precision to outsmart police. On the other hand, they became legends, the kind of criminals people talk about like folk heroes, admired for their discipline and style, even though their crimes left real victims and losses behind. In the end, they weren't superheroes, and they weren't movie characters. They were humans, skilled, fearless, and maybe desperate, who happened to pull off some of the boldest heists in modern history. And here's the thing, the mystery isn't solved. Some Panthers are locked away, but others, they might still be out there, maybe planning, maybe watching, maybe waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. Now, I want to hear from you. Were the Pink Panthers true masterminds rewriting the rules of heists, or just ex-soldiers riding on luck and chaos? Drop your take in the comments, because honestly, this is one of those stories people can never seem to agree on. And if you enjoyed this video, you're going to love what's coming next. We've got more untold stories of real-life criminals and legends that sound like movie scripts, except every word of it actually happened. So, hit that subscribe button and join me for the next one, because trust me, the Pink Panthers are just the beginning.